Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story: letting agents try and shaft us by doing an SH job and not telling the landlords anything, and it bites them in the A when they can't sue us. The second story: boss ordered me and then screwed up. And the first story is: try and sue us after effing up, get fired instead. When my second year of university rolled around, I was living with 3 other friends in a property we rented through a letting agency, which had a ridiculous pun for a name, but go off. And the house initially was perfectly fine. We moved in the beginning of August and had no problems for a while. When they asked early on whether we wanted to sign a contract for next year, we said sure and signed a new contract in November, due to start the next academic year. We know this was an F-up in hindsight, but we really didn't think we'd have serious issues. However, when it started getting colder in winter months after a mild autumn, we realized that our boiler was absolutely god-awful. It would fail about once a week, barely heat the radiators and wouldn't heat rooms, and would need repressuring each time it died. Being students and not too wise about renting, we just put up with this at first, dutifully emailing the agents every time it broke, and waited for them to send someone out. In the meantime, the busted boiler meant that the hot water was dodgy, sometimes cutting out, and that the house was freezing. And as such, the monthly utility bills were through the roof. One was almost 1.5 times that month's rent. Since the boiler was essentially now a very expensive kettle, and we needed office heaters on almost constantly so we didn't get frostbite. We could constantly see our breath, and practically needed to be fully dressed to sleep. This caused issues: constant colds for one guy, mold growing in the bathroom since we didn't ventilate well, as to not lose the little heat the house retained, and being unable to dry our clothes. We didn't have a tumble dryer, just clothes horse. We were fed up and decided we wanted out of the new contract. Because we went through an agency, we had no direct contact with the landlord. Every query and contact was through the agents. This is important to remember for later. The agents, while very polite over the phone and in person, were flaky and bad at fixing problems, and it took months for them to send a gas man over. And even then it was just to renew safety certs, and he didn't even do his job right. So a couple weeks later another guy was called out when it broke again. The landlord even comes for this visit to make sure there are no more F-ups, and this is our first time meeting her. She was a bit of a soccer mom type, but she seemed to be sorting it, and the issue was kind of fixed, as well as an ancient boiler that really needed replacing could be fixed. This was the last time we talked to them directly. Through this whole process, my parents had been helping us document things, my mom being a solicitor, and my dad a landlord himself, so they knew their stuff. They were grumbling about the agents from the start, but for us it was easier to just put up with most of the BS, since uni work was stressful enough without all this. Taking the offhand advice given to us by the agents at the beginning of the tenancy, we kept great records and pictures of every document, email, and letters we received, and took pictures of problems and work being carried out for record keeping. We eventually figured they'd try and shaft us in some form sooner or later, so evidence was needed. We emailed them over the break, officially saying we wanted out of next year's tenancy. They were amiable, and said that if we could get someone else to take care of it, sure, but very adamant that if we didn't, we had to keep paying rent for that contract. We have house viewings and we advertise for months, but we get nowhere. At this point, tensions are rising, and my mom has taken our challenge as a personal hobby to sort out legally. Since we had initially tried to be low-maintenance tenants and deal with small issues, our contract stated that any issues related to the property needed to be sorted by the landlords or the agents, in case we caused further damage trying to do repairs. We instead decided to do exactly what our contract said. We emailed them constantly about every tiny issue we had, from a broken light bulb to a frosty letter flap. We knew our contracts front to back, the local laws around renting, and asked the uni about student renting for specific detail. Getting permission to change a light bulb became a bit of an inside joke to us at this point. How many working days is it going to take to change it this time? 3 to 5. It's Friday night. We then made sure we complied with every single thing they asked us to do in order to leave this new contract, like advertise, accommodate all viewings, keep them updated about anyone who is interested, etc. We went above and beyond trying to get some poor suckers to take this house off our hands. We emailed constantly through this for a paper trail. We made sure we could document this entire thing. It was stressful, but my parents assured us that things would work out, and knowing we were annoying them as much as they annoyed us helped. When we move out at the end of the first tenancy and hand our keys in with explicit letters saying we were not returning for the next contract, we waited for the SH to hit the fan. A few weeks later, while I'm on holiday, we all get emails, forwarded from the landlord via the agents, saying that unless we immediately found new tenants or agreed to stay on, they'd sue us. Scare tactics pretty much. This was also the first time we'd had an email directly forwarded from the landlord, since usually the agents just passed on any info, etc. in their own words. The landlord said they'd had no notification saying we wanted out of the new tenancy, that this was out of the blue, and therefore they weren't able to advertise for new tenants. So we dutifully sent them a large email with screenshots and pictures of email notifications of house viewings. Emails about potential takers, the original email about us not wanting to take the contract with the date 6 months beforehand clearly highlighted, and waited. After a quiet period, we got an almost sullen-sounding email saying that they would drop it if we paid 4 months' rent from the new contract. Since although there was an error in communication, we still did not fulfill our end and provide replacement tenants. So out rolls another long email with photos of everything the agents had effed up, including the dodgy gas man visit. Came to learn what he did was illegal and potentially dangerous, and it was the agent's job to make sure he did his job right. The fact that the new contract signing was botched in the first place due to the agent's error, and one of our housemates had bought a laser thermometer to document how cold the rooms were, sometimes as low as 8 Celsius, 45 Fahrenheit, and had taken pictures of readings, so there was a heavy implication that the house was not suitable for habitation during that time. We haven't received a single email since that, and when the bus goes past the house recently, I see the letting sign has been changed to a different company, and the house is no longer available through the original agency, so they got fired by the landlords for effing up so much. I feel smug every time I go past. The second story is, what do you mean it's illegal? This happened many years ago. I had been working in the cinema industry for many years, working my way from lowly usher up to full manager. I had been working as a manager in a small privately owned cinema, making a decent wage, but decided to take up a job offer from a big multiplex chain. Although it was less money, it was closer to home, and I felt there was more job advancement opportunities. Worst career mistake I ever made. The chain, let's call them SH Show Cinemas, was probably the worst employers I ever had. They were cheapskates when it came to wages, and were very hostile to all their employees. If something happened that could be explained by either honest mistake or malicious act, they would immediately assume maliciousness and treat it as such. As a manager, I was expected and required to work a minimum 56-hour week, even though the salary was based on a 40-hour week, and there was no paid overtime. After a bit of rough calculation, I found I was being paid way less than the legal minimum hourly wage, so this should demonstrate what a bunch of cheapskates they were. On a day that was particularly slow, a directive came from above to let workers go home early, so as to save on the wages bill. I talked with every member of staff on shift that day, asking if who wanted an early night. Some took me up on the offer, but since most were struggling students, they didn't want to take a loss of wages. On the next day, the area manager came for his monthly criticism visit to tell us all what a bunch of useless lazy C's we all were. I'm not joking, this is what he would tell us, and decided he would tell us off for not sending people home early as instructed. AM is area manager. Me, guess who? AM, what the heck is up with the figures from yesterday? The attendance figures were abysmal, and your staffing was too high. Didn't you a-holes get the memo to dismiss unneeded staff? Me, yes, I went round every staff member on shift last night, and sent home everyone who wanted to. Unfortunately, not everyone wanted to cut their shift short. AM, what do you mean you asked? You effing tell them they're not needed. Me, but if I do that, we still must pay them for the full shift. AM, no, you don't if they're not here. They don't get paid. Me, that's not how it works. If we ask them to go and they agree, we don't have to pay. If we order them to leave, we are in effect putting them on suspension, which requires us to pay them. He went quiet at that, and I thought that was the end of it. Till later that day when a call from the district manager, AM's boss, comes through to me. DM, what's this I hear about you telling AM you won't send staff home early when it's quiet? Me, as I explained to AM, if we order someone to go home early, we must pay them for the full shift. DM, that's rubbish. If we don't need them, we don't pay them. I don't know where you got the idea it was any other way. Me, well, I consulted with a solicitor who specializes in employment law, and she said, DM, you did what? How dare you discuss confidential company policies with a third party? You're nothing but a troublemaker, and I'm going to see to it that you suffer the consequences for this breach of confidentiality. With that, he hung up. About 20 minutes later, the phone goes again. This time, it's the company director, basically the head of all operations for the country, and she is super peeved. CM, company manager. CM, right, me, DM, and AM have told me all about you. Who the heck do you think you are telling us how to run the company? Me, pardon me if I'm mistaken, but I do believe part of my duties as a manager is to ensure that the company is not put in a legally actionable position, which we potentially could if someone decided to pursue an action against us, in a case where we send someone home from a shift without payment. CM, that's BS. Who told you that crap? Me, the company solicitor. CM, after a few moments of silence, then in a slightly quieter voice. What? Me, remember that employment law course you had us all managers go on? That's one of the topics that came up. CM, well, this is the first I'm hearing of this, and this is a policy that's been in use for a while. Me, that may be so, but all it takes is for one employee who knows their rights to bring a complaint against us, and we won't have a leg to stand on. CM: That may be so, but we're not going to change policy. We'll let this go for now, but I don't want you telling anyone about this. Another thing, we're sick to death of you stirring up troubles. From now on, if someone higher up in the management chain than you tells you to do something, you bloody well do it without any complaints. Do I make myself clear? Me, Crystal. End of call. So that's the background. Now we get to the malicious compliance aspect of the story. Due to their attitude, SH Show Cinemas had a high turnover of managers. Most quickly got tired off the constant denigration and the poor wages and moved on quickly. As a result of this, we had a brand new general manager who had no prior cinema experience. Now, the new GM was a bit annoyed, as was Hogmanay, New Year's Eve for anyone outside Scotland. But we were opening for midnight screenings. New GM would rather be at a party getting SH faced, so he decided that he was closing early, and if anyone actually tried to buy tickets for one of the midnight screenings, he would just tell them that there was a technical fault. As I was on shift with him that night, I tactfully tried to dissuade him, but was overruled. Of course, he got caught after head office received a complaint, actually from another branch, which decided to do the same thing, but they cried that my GM did it as well, as if that somehow excused their actions. I was hauled in for a disciplinary with the DM. I knew they were planning on firing me, as they had fired the assistant on duty at the other branch, as well for being complicit. DM: So you were on shift that night? Me: Yes. DM: Did GM discuss with you that he planned to close early? Me: He did. DM: And what did you say? Me: I strongly advised him to run the screenings as planned. We had advertised them in advance, and thus had a duty to remain open. DM: And you didn't think to bring this up with anyone higher up in management? Me: I would have, but I've been expressly ordered by CM that if anyone senior to me in the management chain tells me to do something, I'm to bloody well do it without any complaints. DM: Oh. Awkwardly looks at notes. You can go now. So GM gets fired and I keep my job, but obviously I know my career with SH Show is going nowhere. I receive no further promotion. I'm not ready for more responsibility, but I am expected to train new management employees with no previous cinema experience, who have been hired straight into a position senior to mine. Thankfully, not long after, I managed to move into a much better paying IT position and could wave goodbye to the worst employers I've ever had. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you liked it, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button.